who faced down the heart of darkness and acquitted themselves with distinction. When darkness seemed to be overwhelming, the bastards in Ramadi proved once again they were second to none, and a far superior fighting force than the insurgents, but not without loss. Comfort those who mourn, and give strength to those who grieve. For the wounds that are left unseen, we pray for restoration, healing, and wholeness. And as we gather here today, may the bonds of brotherhood refresh, uplift, and replenish the weary. We ask all this in the most holy name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the commanding officer of 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, Lieutenant Colonel Patrick C. Holland.
Ladies and gentlemen, families and friends, Gold Star families, Major General Kennedy, Major General Weiler, Cole, Colonel Bronzy, Sergeant Major Booker, bastards, both past and present, thank you for being here, and we welcome you. I'll keep my remarks brief, but I want you to know what an honor it is to have you here today, to have you here back in the San Mateo, and in a way, to have you here back home. This battalion's got a long and distinguished history, and to be able to reflect, honor, and remember a part of it today with you all is not lost on us. It's something that we feel is special. It's something we take pride in. It's something we take joy in doing. So thank you for being here. I would like to thank a few folks. First, to the Warrior Reunion Foundation, Mr. Bart Cole and his team that helped us. I think we helped them as well set this event up. It doesn't happen by accident. They work with a number of folks, including Mercy Medical Angel Wings, Wounded Warrior Foundation, and others, to make events like this happen. And they support other units across the Marine Corps. So if you're interested or inclined to support those types of things, there's some QR codes and some information up here at some of the desks. I'd like to thank Mr. Mark Sperling. He's our deployment readiness coordinator. Helps a lot with our families, but he also has his hands in anything that we ask him to have his hands in. His fingerprints are all over this thing today. I'd like to thank Brian Britton, who refurbished the battalion's cross. Normally rests on top of 1st Sergeant's Hill. It'll go back up there next week once we get across the river. I'd also like to thank 1st Sergeant Sharp, our headquarters of the company, 1st Sergeant and Gunner Sergeant Martinez. They're responsible for the the ceremony today, and they've done a great job putting it together, as well as the 11th Marine Ceremonial Battery and the 1st Marine Division Band, which is here today as well. So thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and give them a quick round of applause. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Joe Hayes, Token Company, up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, Marines and sailors, families of our beloved 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, we come here today from all over America as we mark 20 years since the Battle of Ramadi. For those that fought in it, for the families that had a loved one in that fight, for every family that lost someone in that fight, our lives will change forever. I'd also call to your remembrance how much our lives have changed since that homecoming in September 2004. It was pure joy to come home to you. And as we came back to the fighting 5th Marine Regiment, we always think about who is not here with us today that was there when we got back. We remember those. Some very dear Marines, some very dear family members. Thank you to Major General Kennedy, Brigadier General Weiler, Colonel Bronzy, Sergeant Major Booker. Gentlemen, you led 2-4 in various capacities through the Battle of Ramadi and served with distinction. You went on to other assignments after that deployment and encountered adversity as it presented itself. I dare to say that this particular assignment, this deployment to Ramadi in 2004, when every jihadi in the city came out to fight, has to have been the pinnacle of your careers. Before you today are men that have loved and respected you for the last 20 years, and will be your friends over the next 40. You men are truly loved by us. May God bless you. Thank you to the men that put this event together. As already stated, Brian Britton, Marvin Indito, Bart Cole, Jeff Andrade, Jay Redford, the Honorable Pete Flom, Rick White, and Bob Gibson. Well done, gentlemen. You have put something on that has made the bastards proud. Before I would patrol with my Marines, my squad or my platoon, I would always lead my Marines in a prayer or the reading of a psalm. Please allow me the honor, once again, as we set out on foot one more time, not to fight, but to remember and to honor. I wrote this prayer a few years ago, sitting in a tree stand and thinking about God's blessing in my life, how he sustained me through the fight on 6 April 2004, and how God is still with me now. I wrote this in the style of King David, a man who knew the sting of battle, violence, and sorrow. I think this prayer will resonate with many of you because it's quite common that every one of us had a low point in that battle. This is called the Bastard's Prayer to the Magnificent King. I will love you, O Lord, my rock, my fortress, my strong deliverer. You are my shield in whom I trust. When violent men encompassed me all about and sought my life, there was none to help. The jaws of death had encircled me and clung to me. My strength had dried up and I was brought low. My blood poured out of my veins into the streets. Then I called on the name of the Lord. I cried out to my King, and he bent his ear down to me. From my low position he heard me. even from his holy mountain. Then the Lord answered me in the day of battle. In my distress, he sent to me. And then my strong enemy found calamity. Yes, he found destruction. The snare that my enemy had set for me entangled his foot, and there was no one to save him. He cried out in distress, and no one heard him. For you have armed me with strength for my bow, when it had been dried up. You sent a strong troop when I was cut off. You have given me sight when I could not see the violence and wait for me, and you have enlightened my dark path. The man who fears the Lord shall never be moved. He shall never be shaken, but he shall be like a tree. Surely you have blessed my house with salvation and adorned it with green olive trees. That's our kids. Praise to my God, who is called Yah, who answers those who call upon him and delivers in the day of battle. He thunders from heaven, and he rides upon the clouds. At this time, I invite Major General Kennedy, affectionately known by his men as Bastard 6. 20 years ago, this man had the weight of the world on his shoulders. As 2-4's battalion commander in the most hotly contested piece of dirt in the Triangle of Death, then Lieutenant Colonel Kennedy maneuvered his Marines not from the command post, but from the center of the fight. Lieutenant Colonel Kennedy maintained a grasp of the entire battle space as he directed his company commanders with his intent, while at the same time interacting with localized fights at the squad level. General Kennedy, we are grateful for your exemplary service and your steadfast leadership.
Pat, if you don't mind, the Marines at ease, this might be a while. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine the horror of being a young Marine in 2024 and having this crap descend upon you. And you're going to know that for the next 3 days you're going to be bombarded with war stories. Most of them are bullshit. And you're just going to have to sit there and politely nod. And I saw a long line of cars fleeing this morning when I was entering Cristianito's gate. And those are the smart ones, I guess. Chaplain, Joe Hayes probably just put you out of business, partner, so you better look for a new line of work. You know, I thought I would come here. I haven't been invited in 20 years. And they waited until I got fat and bearded in order to offer me a chance to look like some of you, as a matter of fact. But I thought that there would be folks here on this side of the aisle from 1st Marine Division. General Weiler, thanks for representing. But other people, former battalion commanders, retired colonels, they all live out here in Southern California, but I thought that they might show up and witness our spectacle. But because we are bastards, they left us to our own devices. And I would tell these kids in their blue deltas, that's the lot of being a magnificent bastard here at 5th Marine Regiment, that you are the red-headed stepchild. Nobody's ever going to love you, so get used to it. And you want to know something? We don't like those people anyway, so shut up. Brigadier General Rob Weiler and his wife Nicole. Rob, would you stand up? We want to embarrass you. Nicole, you can stand up too. Be equally embarrassed. One of ours made good. General Weiler is the Assistant Division Commander in the finest division on the face of the earth, and he is leading Marines every day and trying to imbue in them the same fighting spirit that you embodied 20 years ago. So Rob, good on you. Sergeant Major Booker returned early this morning from a 12-hour patrol in southern San Clemente last night. I heard that all friendly forces re-entered lines. Carla, I don't know how you do it. There's a place in heaven for you next to St. Peter. Sergeant Major, good to see you. Hey, I'm going to call somebody else out that probably is going to be mortified, but Colonel Jodelle Schroeder. Jody, would you stand up? Most of you knew her as Captain Schroeder, the head of the nurses at Charlie Med. And for some of you, she literally saved your life. Her and her team worked tirelessly. Colonel Schroeder is, I believe, taking over the nurse corps for the Army. Is that correct, or am I exaggerating? I drink too much and I have Alzheimer's, so I never know what's what I remember. But hoorah! That's what we say. Also, I don't have to welcome anybody that's senior to me today, so I'm going to forget all that. What I wanted to do is address a couple of audiences this morning. First and foremost amongst them is Seniority, or Gold Star families that are sitting along the first row, here to represent the people that didn't make it back in September of 2004. As a matter of fact, we had additional folks that fought with us that didn't make it back on subsequent deployments. I cannot imagine as a parent what it is like to have to bury your child. You are the victims in this story. We went and did the thing that we were asked to do. We did it as best that we could. We did it with people that we trusted, that we still trust to this day. You had to sit back and wait for that dreaded knock, and I don't know what that is like. And you've carried that dread and the anguish of losing your loved one for the last 20 years. That's a tough life, and I don't envy you, and I am sorry for your loss. I said this 20 years ago, and I'll say it again today, that the men, back then the battalion was all men, the men that we lost in 2004 were not victims. They didn't consider themselves victims. They didn't consider themselves to be unlucky, that they were warriors that were chosen from the fabric of this nation to go guard its shores. And they did it with about 1,100 of their best friends. And in virtually every single case, those men were rushing to the sounds of their comrades who were either pinned down by fire or calling for reinforcements. Virtually every single time. And in a handful of cases, they were standing guard over their comrades that were trying to sleep or eat or get their weapons put together, and they were guardians on a gate. They were standing at the government center. They were manning an outpost way out in the middle of nowhere. And the enemy attacked them over and over again. But I would tell you that they didn't live in terror and they didn't live in fear. And although we mourn their loss, that they couldn't be here today, they went out as Marines do. They are true warriors, and they are our heroes. And I would tell you that I can't duplicate what you've lost, but there are 1,000 new brothers waiting to stand by and support if you ever need us. And I say that for everybody that is assembled here and the ones that could not make it. Gold Star families, we salute you. image of your sons and husbands and brothers, 37 of them actually, if you count the ones that we lost later on. They're guarding St. Peter's gates as we speak. And they're in a hasty defense, waiting for the martyrs that so foolishly thought they could get a cheap ticket to paradise in 2004. And for the rest of eternity, they will be repelling those martyrs by fire in close combat. And they are watching over us as we speak. And they're here with us today. These are true warriors. The warriors that we don't talk a lot about, and history is fickle about who they write the stories about. In the 20 years since we've gotten back from Ramadi, there has been no official history to record the exploits of the people that are assembled here today, which I think is a crime. And you've seen other units in other cities telling their story to the news, and there are books that have been written, and somehow to date, the magnificent bastards of Ramadi have still not had their story told. And so what I wanted to do is just tell you a couple of things that maybe you didn't know about this magnificent group of men. That 21 years ago, today, the 1st Marine Division was standing outside the gates of Baghdad, waiting to knock out the dictator. 21 years ago today, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines was stuck with the 31st MEU in Okinawa for almost a year. And the minute those poor souls came home, they made a beeline for the exits because of stop loss, and they thought that they had missed the war of their generation. 21 years ago today, 230 young men were in high school or had just recently graduated, and they had seen the news, and they had either enlisted or they were about to enlist, and they had no idea what history had in store for them. 21 years ago today. As the division came back from Iraq, and we started losing the folks that didn't want to stick around for the next deployment to Okinawa, our numbers went down to about 450 souls, which is small. And by the end of October, we were at the lowest point of our manning strength. And we were attending the Marine Corps Ball in November, and General Mattis tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey partner, your battalion is going to be the first to go back to Iraq next year. You're not going to go to Okinawa," which agreed. You know, every good fighting person wants to go to an adventure. And I asked him, "Sir, how much time do we have to get ready?" He says, "You're leaving in January." Mind you, this is the 10th of November. And so, over the course of the next 2.5 months, because we didn't actually leave until February, every single graduating class from the School of Infantry on both coasts were vectored to this parade deck. And Sergeant Major Booker and the first sergeants were joining people virtually in this cycle of new joints showing up. We joined the last people to this battalion 2 weeks before we deployed. And my guess is that they never fired the weapons that they were assigned until they were firing them at the enemy a few months later. That is not the way you wish that you go to war. In many cases, we were virtual strangers. And we were sent to a fight that back then they called stability and support operations. And we thought we were going to be building schools and handing out soccer balls and running medcap and doing all the things that you would see after a conflict. And the day that we took over Ramadi on 13 March 2004, we took our first casualties. In fact, the casualties were so horrible that I had never actually seen anything, people that survived those wounds. And Captain Schroeder even pulled me aside with some grim news. And that did not look like the picture that had been painted for us. It did not look like we were out helping a nation to recover. And over the course of the next several weeks, we had increasing violence build and build and build until 20 years ago today. And we lost our first Marines on patrols, and we took some wounds, but it was still of a manageable level. But on the 6th of April, everything changed in our worlds. Many of you lost your youth on the 6th of April. The blush of what is possible may have seemed no longer possible. And as the patrols went out that morning, the companies executing their missions as they were assigned, like any other day that they went out, they didn't imagine that history would deal them a fate that few had expected. Sergeant Major Booker and I were back at the command post, and the calls started coming in of Marines that were wounded. And it wasn't in one location like you normally would see, or a single event. This was the entire city seemed to be attacking the battalion at once. And we had Marines pinned down in the cemetery along Route Michigan. We had Marines pinned down at the tank graveyard, overwatching that locale. They were at the fish hook under fire. And the QRFs, quick reaction forces, were sent out to try to figure out what was going on and get our people back to safety. And as the day snowballed, we had the unfortunate reports of Marines that had lost their lives. And by the end of that evening, a makeshift morgue was created out of the combat outpost. And I remember standing with Sergeant Major Booker under a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling and seeing my worst nightmare of Marines that we were going to have to send home to their parents. And as you can imagine, the Marines were angry, they were bewildered, everything that they thought that they were deployed for was no longer valid, and that this enemy was not here to welcome us, but we were going to have to fight them to the bitter end. The next day, the patrols went back out on the 7th of April. And within about an hour, the calls started coming in again that Marines were receiving contact. But unlike the 6th of April, on the 7th of April, these were no longer Marines that could be fooled by the treachery of the residents in Ramadi. But this time, you had men that overnight became hardened veterans. And they took the fight to the enemy. And they fought in some of the same neighborhoods that they had the day previous, and they continued out into the Sofia district, pursuing these terrorists. And I got a call the next day from the division commander that 200 enemy bodies were stacked up at the morgue in Ramadi. And that's in addition to the bodies that had already been claimed by their families. And so never again would the magnificent bastards be fooled by the treachery of people that smile at you when you're passing and plant a bomb into the road when they think they got you unawares. That we were going to fight them. General Mattis always said, no better friend and no worst enemy. These were their worst enemies, these Marines of 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. On the 8th of April, all the platoons filed up to their respective lines of departure to take the fight back on the 3rd day. And they line up in the dark, and the guidons are snapping in the breeze, and they cross on time, because that's what our leaders insisted upon, and they went hunting for the enemy. And all day long on the 8th of April, they looked for these bad guys. And by the end of the day, we had no contact. We had no idea where the enemy had gone to, and we finally got reports back that night that the planned 3-day jihad that they had meticulously laid out that were going to eject 2-4 from the city had spent itself after 2 days. You killed them all. Because we had a motto that you kick a man once he's down. On the 10th, we figured out where they had gone to lick their wounds, and Echo Company and Weapons Company went out there, an Operation Bug Hunt, and killed a whole bunch more. And we know it was effective because when you look at our combat reports, we really didn't have any significant firefights for over a month after the 10th of April. The city heated back up over the course of the summer. More people filtered in to try to get rid of the nuisance that was 2-4, and they just couldn't do it. Meanwhile, other cities along the Euphrates were blowing up. Fallujah boiled over. Al-Qaim boiled over. Heat boiled over. And General Mattis summarized it in a book later that he said as the division was fighting across the entirety of Al-Anbar province, he didn't have to worry about what was going on in Ramadi because the Marines of 2-4 held. It means you never broke. It means you never let the enemy breathe again after their treachery on the 6th of April. It meant that they will tell tales to their children as they write their histories of how terrible an enemy you were, chasing them to the end when we departed in September of that year. Most of you don't know, because you'd already gone to Al-Assad and we were flying back to Southern California, that we left small groups of NCOs in the FOBs to turn over to 2-5 that replaced us for their 6-month deployment. And somehow the enemy foolishly underestimated Fox Company, who was sitting out in the snake pit, weapons platoon Fox Company, sitting out in the snake pit. And I didn't see Gunner Dunham here yet. Maybe he's out there lurking. He counted 50 Iraqi bodies in the street after they foolishly tried to take the snake pit on the last day that we were in that city. I hear a voice. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tough to make those sacrifices, to bond with people within your squad and the company and the battalion. We don't do it for medals, but we wouldn't mind a little recognition that these Marines did what they were asked to do, and they did it in a fashion that virtually no other battalion has done before or since in this war. And I'm hoping that this newest generation of 2-4 Marines understands the honor and legacy of those that went before them. And even though this looks like a motorcycle reunion, these are the finest infantry Marines and support Marines that this country has produced in this generation. And they have written a chapter that I hope is developed and is retold that ought to serve as a marker for generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, those that did not serve with the magnificent bastards in Ramadi in 2004, I would ask that you give them a round of applause, a long earned round of applause for the veterans 20 years since. I'm going to shut up here. I've spoken too long, but I just want to give one last order as a commanding officer of this battalion. That those that survived 20 years ago need to survive for the next 40 years. Joe Hayes touched upon it. That nobody's going to give you a break in this life. We've learned that. But that you survived something that 99% of this country has never asked to perform. A sacrifice. And you've got to live for the remainder. And when I mean live, I mean you have to thrive for the remainder of your time on this planet. And if it's been tough being out on your own, you're out in the middle of who knows where, there is a network of us that you can reach through a thing called the internet. It's new. Even Pete Flom has figured out how to do it. He bombards me with hate mail. But you don't need to do this thing alone. And the folks that didn't come today are the ones you need to reach out to after we're done here and tell them that the battalion still counts you on our muster. And if you don't have a job, we'll find you a job. And if you're hitting the sauce too hard, you need to figure out if that's good for you for the long haul. And if you can't get a date, Sergeant Major Booker will send a reconnaissance patrol out there to find you. But you need to live. It's a marathon. And nobody really cares about what we did 20 years ago. So let's see what we can do for the next 20 years. So because I was a Catholic and I'm not a preacher, I'm going to surrender the microphone to go back to the Colonel. And let's get to know each other while we're here in San Clemente this week. Let's take care of the ones that did not show up. Put the word out that we want to track them down, and we want to make sure that we all finish together. Semper Fi, Marines.
At this point in time, we will have a roll call for our fallen. Ladies and gentlemen, the roll call for the fallen of 2-4. PFC, Ryan M. Jerbeck. Staff Sergeant Alan K. Walker. Lance Corporal Deshaun E. Otey. Corporal Jeffrey G. Green. Lance Corporal Benjamin R. Gonzalez. Second Lieutenant John T. Robleski. Lance Corporal Todd J. Bowling. Sergeant Kenneth Condi. Lance Corporal Anthony P. Roberts. Lance Corporal Benjamin R. Carmen. Lance Corporal Nicholas N. Aldrich. Corporal Tommy L. Parker. Lance Corporal Kyle D. Crowley. Lance Corporal Jonathan W. Collins. PFC Jeffrey S. Morris. Lance Corporal Derek L. Palau. Lance Corporal Rafael Reynosa Suarez. Corporal Bumrock Lee. Lance Corporal Jeremiah E. Savage. Lance Corporal Andrew S. Dang.
Engineers up.
PFC Christopher D. Mabry. PFC Moises A. Langhorse. Lance Corporal Travis J. Layfield. Lance Corporal Juan Lopez. Lance Corporal Caleb J. Powers. PFC Eric A. Ayom. Lance Corporal Marcus M. Cherry. Lance Corporal John T. Sims. Lance Corporal Cody S. Calavan. Corporal Dustin H. Schrage. Lance Corporal William J. Wiskowich.
Years up.
Lance Corporal Pedro Contreras. PFC Christopher R. Cobb. HM3 Fernando A. Mendez Aceves. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise in a moment of silence as we pause to honor these brave men and women that have given their lives in the service of our nation.
Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, to honor those who have served in the 1st Marine Division, the division song Waltzing Matilda will now be played. The song originates from Australia, where the division maintained a training base in World War II, prepared for the island campaigns. Over the decade, the division's Marines and sailors have marched off to war to this historic tune. We ask that all those who have served in the division from World War II to those currently serving in the Blue Diamond today stand to be recognized. We respectfully request all others remain seated and silent to honor those absent who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and those present who have served with the 1st Marine Division. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. We invite you to enjoy some refreshments on the west side of the parade deck, and you are more than welcome to visit the 5th Marine Regiment Memorial Garden. As a reminder, the Memorial Cross dedication hike will begin at 13:30 on the parade deck. The gym facility will be open so you can change over. On behalf of the commanding officer, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, thank you for your attendance. Semper Fi.